get straight into programming for today, we did leave out a session yesterday, which was the next $1 billion frontier in Africa. Agribusiness, the next billionaire frontier. Now, we will all acknowledge the impact that agriculture has had on our economies, not just as Zimbabweans, but as Africans. At one point, Zimbabwe was touted as the breadbasket of Africa, which means there is potential there for us to return to that status and beyond. How do we go about this? Our next panel is going to be looking at that. Now, joining this panel, or rather leading this panel, please could you help me welcome Professor Grace Mugumbate from MSU. Please give her a loud round of applause as she comes forward to take over. Now, she will be joined on stage by two panelists, and then she will have one who will be joining her virtually. But please give her another round of applause as she comes up.
Good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to focus on a very important topic, agribusiness, a new billionaire frontier. Agribusiness is considered a billionaire frontier in Africa due to its vast potential, as the sector is projected to be worth over $1 trillion by 2030. This was highlighted by the African Development Bank in 2018. Today, it's more than 5 years from 2018. And the big question is, where are we? Have we embraced this as Africa? And are we on the right track to achieve that projection that we had? In addition, the bank highlighted that agribusiness will become the new oil on the continent. I paused here to say, it will become the new oil. So yesterday we talked about poverty. We're looking at the challenges that we are having. And now we are saying, with these projections, where are we as Africa? To help me unpack this today, I have a team of specialists. The first panelist we have is Paulo Pan, who is the Africa Business Development Specialist, Beyond Africa Group in Brazil. He will be joining us online, and I hope that everything is now set. Great. Our second panelist is Coilard Hamusimbi, Board Chairperson, Ndaba Agricultural Policy Research Institute. Coilard, please come and join me here, if you are here. Yes. Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, you may take a seat. Yeah, somewhere there. Yeah. The third panelist is Francis Macheka, CEO, AFC Holdings. Let's welcome Francis to the... Our discussion, ladies and gentlemen, is going to focus on how innovation, investment strategies, technology, and policies and inclusive practices can build a more resilient and prosperous future for Africa as we unpack today's topic. So, Paulo, hello.
Hello for everybody. Thank you for the invitation and congratulations for the great event. It's very important to be in this panel. I thank you very much for our friends, the panelists. Unfortunately, I cannot join you physically. I'm in Rome now in the World Food Forum, exactly talking about the billion frontier, that agribusiness.
Thank you very much. Paulo, you may go ahead. You are going to present and focusing mainly on African Fund for Food Security. Alonso, you may go ahead.
I'm from Brazil. It's we have a food security fund just to invest in Africa, and looking for innovation, looking for all these aspects that you're talking about. I think today it's when you say that agribusiness is a new oil. I think agribusiness is life. If you look for 17 goals, the first two they are most important. We're talking about hunger and poverty. In agribusiness, the only way for you to solve this problem. Talking about innovation, investment, and technology, if you look for the numbers, we need to not to convince more. We need to just to show the special numbers talking about agribusiness. If you look for Africa, like you say, it's almost, I'm sure that more than this, more than 2030, we will have more than 1 trillion in this business. But today we're talking about Africa. When you talk about this opportunity, we're talking about 6% of the arable land in the world is in Africa. I'm talking about the most young population in the world with 19 years. If you compare with Europe, for example, we're talking about 44 years. We're talking about our population today almost 1.5. In 25 years, in 2050, you'll be 2.5. We have the biggest commercial agreement in the world with 54 countries. You know, all these aspects show us that Africa is for today, it's not for tomorrow. In terms of innovation, technology, agriculture today is technology. But of course, we need to understand that this development needs to go step by step. You cannot just jump in for the base until the high technology. In my perspective, it's how much you can exchange knowledge and opportunities. Like Brazil is a very important powerhouse in agriculture, but we need to be more close in technology and experience. Africa can take advantage of Brazil, and Brazil can take advantage of Africa in this business.
Thank you very much for the opening remarks. I will now move on to Coilard. May you just give us your insights on the topic and the opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor, and good morning, everyone, once again. Yeah, indeed, I think agribusiness is going to be the lubricant of socio-economic development for Africa going forward, specifically for Southern Africa. Why do we say so? Paulo, I think, talked about the growing population. Southern Africa is contributing significantly to that continental population growth. Zambia, for instance, we are growing at 3% per annum. Zimbabwe is about 1.8 per annum. So we are still, apart from the youth bulge, the mouths which we are already struggling to feed now, we are actually seeing more and more of the young population coming in our countries, and those have come along with the changing nutritional requirements. The eating habits are changing. That is spawning some opportunities for investments in value addition, food processing, and the like. But maybe coming from what the World Bank is saying, I mean the African Development Bank is saying, what exactly makes this $1 trillion business opportunity in agribusiness? I think the first comes from the huge import substitution which Africa and Southern Africa, for instance, has. In SADC alone, we are talking of around about 12, 15, $20 billion of food imports into our region, most of those commodities which we can produce, especially for Zimbabwe and Zambia. We're talking of poultry, wheat, aquaculture, which Zimbabwe and Zambia, I think we have perfected the art to that effect. So specifically when I was looking for Zimbabwe and Zambia, we can easily substitute up to $12 billion in wheat imports for Africa, in aquaculture imports for Africa, and also in poultry, broiler and egg imports for Africa. So indeed, there it is, we have these investment opportunities. And then again, as if that is not enough, Prof, the geopolitical dynamics actually have again pressed Africa to be the answer to most of these supply chain disruptions. If you are seeing, Asia now is increasingly looking for alternative sourcing, apart from South America, they are looking for Africa. And soybean alone, for instance, we have, if we took China, they import up to $62, $70 billion of soybean. Most of it has been coming from America. And with what is happening, China is looking for alternative sourcing. Africa can tap into that kind of opportunity. So we are sitting in a place where climate is in our favor, the soils are correct, we have endemic farming skills. Zambia, for instance, always taps from its neighbor for farming skills when we run short. And we are turning around some of the value chains which Zambia never used to participate in. So we have all it takes really to exploit these business opportunities. So what matters now then is, are we in time to align our policy enabling environment? And also, are we proactive enough to tap into these opportunities? Otherwise, this big opportunity can just bypass us again. I think let me end there for now.
Thank you very much. Francis, over to you. Just give us your introductory or opening remarks.
Thank you, Professor. I am aligned with my two colleagues who have just started talking about agriculture. But you all, to make a success of agriculture, there's a bit of things that we must do to ensure that we can actually have a resilient agricultural productivity. And while the potential for Africa, for instance, is huge, there is quite a number of challenges that we must face as a people. Just yesterday, we were talking a lot about energy, and I'm sure it's not a concluded subject. It will be studied again sometime today. There is real challenges for the continent to end up with productivity that can actually carry the importance that it shows. We certainly have abundant land that's available. In fact, Africa has got the most remaining land that can actually be used to feed the world. We have abundant water. If we're talking about Zimbabwe, I think you all have heard that we are the most dammed nation in Africa. If you fly, you see everywhere water. There is a lot of potential that we have. We even have the people, we have the climatic conditions that can actually produce literally every commodity that you can think of. However, there are issues that we need to address for us to have a resilient agricultural productivity. I'm just going to itemize this for the sake of time, for members to think about, for us to be successful and become the billion-dollar industries that we actually are talking about. One of the things we must do is obviously diversification. There's a lot of changes that are taking place in the environment now, particularly weather. And in Zimbabwe, we are particularly vulnerable. I've just been reading the latest report from our weather people for this year's season. And they are saying it will possibly start in December and it will be sharp and short. We were used, as we grew up, to a season that started in October. We should by now have started planting elsewhere. But all this has changed, which means we must adapt to the new changes that have taken place for us to be able to remain productive and to even increase our productivity. So diversification of the type of crops and livestock that we produce is a key fundamental that we must take to heart if we are going to develop this industry into a billion-dollar industry. We must be able to maximize the use of the land. There's a lot of land that we have available, but a lot of it is not actually being worked. And we must make sure that we use that land and use it properly. But how do we do that? We must harvest water. Earlier on I said we are the most dammed nation in the country, But a dam in itself, as you'll hear our minister always say, is not a business. It's the utilization of that dam that makes it worthwhile. So while we have a lot of dammed water, we must be able to develop irrigation systems that will be able to produce the type of commodities we want. We need to collaborate with our partners. There's a lot of people interested in our productivity in Africa. As you heard, many nations are actually looking to Africa to actually supply their foodstuffs. We need to be able to collaborate with them, particularly as it comes to issues of financing, because financing is a key consideration for that. So collaboration and partnerships are a key fundamental that we must embrace. We must be able to build capacity with our farmers. If you look at Zimbabwe, for instance, we have smallholder farmers, our rural folk, adding up to numbers of over 2.5 to 3 million people. And these are the people who actually produce most of the food crops that we have. However, they are also the most vulnerable because they rely on rain-fed agriculture. How can we capacitate them to ensure that they actually produce and be able to give us a commodity that we can not just guarantee their own food security, but also guarantee that we can export to other countries? Sorry, technology is running away. I have already spoken about water management. We need to manage our water properly and put irrigation systems that are efficient. We also need to have guaranteed market access. I know that I talked about the world being hungry, but unless the hungry world comes to us and guarantees us that we will offtake your product. I've just been, I run a bank. Yeah, okay. And we produced a lot of wheat this year. We're struggling to sell it. We need somebody to come and buy it. So, Prof, there's a lot we can do to make sure that we become a $1 trillion business, but we have to work at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis, and thank you to the opening remarks, quite insightful. We all agree that Africa is rich. We have the vast arable land, as has been highlighted, young and energetic workforce, and we can do this as Africa. But then, Francis, you touched on financing. And I was just thinking, can we do everything that we are possibly able to do without the right financing model? Some agribusiness leaders said there is a need to invest $45 billion per year to harness the power of agriculture and move up the value chain to create jobs and wealth. When we look at the investment patterns in Africa, I'll start with you, Paulo. Do we have funding opportunities that are available, enough funding opportunities available for Africa?
Always is access to capital is the key, right? Access to capital for financial market comes from trust. And the biggest challenge that we have today is to attract the private sector, that we have a trust moment to invest in Africa. That's our try to manage to invite a lot of private partners to come together to divide the risk. And to create this trust, to build this trust, the government need to work very close with the private sector because the policies come from the government. And we need to start with a small scale to prove the concept for after to go for a big scale. I'm open to sit with Zimbabwe to understand we are investing $500 million in Africa for food security fund and value chain. We are analyzing different projects, and we are trying to invite a lot of partners for the financial market to show that today is not tomorrow. Business in Africa is today. You just look for the numbers, but we need to encourage more private sector to come together with the government and build trust. For financial system, trust is the word.
Trust is the word, and we have to build trust. Some people say trust is earned. Francis, when we look at the current investment patterns in Zimbabwe and in Africa, are they aligned with the continent's potential growth?
Thank you, Prof, for that question. I think the issue of investment in Zimbabwe is actually split up in terms of both private sector and government. If we're looking at the issue of government, I think we can clearly say that the policies that are being put in place are clearly able to help Zimbabwe and Africa. So the policies are aligned. You can see that the drive that is given by the Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Finance is supposed to enable the productive base to do its work. However, I think the issue of availability of the actual resources to invest is the big challenge. The money is simply not there. If it is there, it's not enough for it to be able to develop the type of productive base that we need for Africa. We are told that 10% of budgets for all countries, as agreed, in Africa must go to agriculture. But I'm not sure that even that is actually being made available. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Coilard, a lot of initiatives have been taken by governments in Africa. In Zimbabwe, there's a lot that is happening in the line of agribusiness. But what innovative agribusiness models are already proving successful? And if you have any, what can we learn from them?
Thank you, Prof. I think listening to my two colleagues, I start to think that actually, like in any other business venture, we may not point to a specific model to be a singular successful model. So equally, when investing in agriculture, I think we may point at success if a model tends to combine a number of key factors. I can take, for instance, a model that combines scalability, a model that spearheads inclusivity, integrating small, medium, large scale into it. It takes everyone on board, those able and willing. A model that has, I think, equitable risk sharing. Agriculture is seen as a ring of fire because of less understood risks in it. But if a business model comes up with equitable risk sharing mechanisms, then it means it stands a good chance of being very successful. A model which also fosters and nurtures structured market channels, and also assured markets, like my colleague here is talking about having produced, struggling to sell. So if a business model then doesn't assure markets, off-take market, then it may not be pointed to be successful. We have good examples of such models. From the large-scale corporate point of view, we have seen commodity-specific investment models in agriculture making a lot of sense. What do I mean by commodity-specific? They identify, for instance, a high-value commodity with export market opportunities. It brings along with some premium pricing, and then you see large-scale, medium-scale leveraging their expertise and competencies, and they start producing that commodity, and they are able to make money at each node of that value chain. I'm not very close home in Zimbabwe, but I've been reading a lot about Zimbabwe. But I think like now you are unlocking the blueberries. Yes, the potato industry is another good example. Back in Zambia, home across there, we have one of the best performing seed sector, where most multinationals, local companies have made Zambia the seed production hub. Why? It's commodity specific, it assures offtake, and it integrates the great players. So those are the successful models which we have seen, insulated, of course, by other risk mitigation in addition to irrigation. So that is an example of that. For smallholder, who are the majority of our producers, we have also some working models. And these are the ones which, for instance, you have large corporates driving commodity outgrower schemes. Now, the trick there is, are you having fair, transparent contracting mechanisms so that each one is given their due share? Are you making sure that there's growth in terms of those lower on the value chain? And is there transparency in sharing costs and sharing margins? In Zambia, we have, for instance, sugarcane outgrower schemes, leveraging big corporates like Zambia Sugar. And we have seen the difference between other smallholder farmers who are not in there. So that's another model which we can do. The poultry sector is also starting to pick from someone doing 100 beds per 1,000 beds per batch, up to someone producing up to 100,000. They put together a process for a specific market. So I think those are the models which we see. So I can simply say that we don't have a one solution model, but it's a model which combines scalability, inclusivity, risk mitigation, assured market offtake. What also defines the success, so how successful these models, investment models can be, is the role government plays. We have seen that the less government is involved, yet playing a very catalytic and enabling role, then such models tend to endure. I thank you.
I think there is no one model that we can isolate, say this is working. But it's good to learn that the blueberry one is working even for Zimbabwe. A number of us here maybe are involved in that. We have peas that are being exported. We have the rock melons that are being exported, and so on. There is a lot that's, I think, the commodity-based model, it really is working. But then we are talking about agriculture in today's world. And today, technology plays a critical role. We touched on AI yesterday, it was mentioned, and we are going to have a session on AI. But the big question is, how is AI going to impact agribusiness in Africa? And how are we empowering those who spend most of their time working on the fields, the young people and the women, so that they embrace AI? We'll start with you, Paulo.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very good question because everybody talking about AI today, and agriculture today is technology. You see, when you look for our population in Africa, it's a very youth population. How you can maintain, how you can promote agriculture for this population, young population, and technology is one of the key. But the first challenge that you have is how much small farmers has access to internet, for example. That's the first question. And the second one, how they can use this. We need to do this link. I think in this, we had started doing a project that we are using the young population to be the intermediary, to do the interlocutor with the small farmer, because we can connect two different channels to access AI. And of course, it's important AI, but on the other side, how is the infrastructure? Because one of the main costs that you have today around the world is infrastructure and delivering package. It's of course AI can work on all the different. Today we can analyze the soil from Brazil in Zimbabwe, just using AI, just using different technologies. But I think it's the first question: how we can do. We cannot jump this phase. We can access We need to access the small farmer, but you need to have someone to do this link, to facilitate this approach.
Thank you. Your thoughts, Francis?
Thanks, Prof. I agree 100%. AI and technology are driving the world now. But I think the biggest challenge we have is the issue of availability of the gadgets or availability of internet in our surroundings. If you look at Zimbabwe, for instance, with all the best intentions, you possibly have only about 20 to 30% of the people, and mainly urban, who actually have access to internet. We need to drive that, to make sure that is available. The young people, for instance, in Zimbabwe are really being encouraged to go into agriculture. And I'm very pleased to say that a lot of them are actually going into that. And using technology, and particularly AI, it's going to make their job very, very easy. As my colleague has just said, productivity and technology are linked because they are all knowledge-based. With AI, you can access any part of the world to get what you want to help you produce. However, you need to be able to access the technology. And I know that a number of our people, particularly in the universities, are developing specific technologies to help with that. But I think their availability to the rest of the population is going to limit our ability to use it. Thanks, Prof.
Okay, is this the same story, Coilard, in Zambia?
Yes, similar lines, but I think for Africa, we have to adapt it to the local situation. What is it, which is the elephant in the room with our agriculture, is productivity. And then policy inconsistencies. And how you wonder how decisions are made for the sector. So I think I see AI helping more to our farmers resolve the productivity issue. Soil testing, like some remotely, like someone has mentioned, predictive analysis, weather. I think you don't really need a very smartphone to have those. So we could contextualize these technological advances in a manner that would be simple and straightforward for our farmers. Some of them still have limited literacy kind of levels. So it will be how we adapt. But I think the market, even among our smallest of the farmers, have adapted, and each one of them, they have taken an aspect of AI, which is making their cost of transactions lower, doing business easier. Biggest for Africa, I think, to close the information asymmetry. I think that is where, both for decision making, market intelligence, I think that is where I see AI and other technologies really helping unlocking both investment and the potential which we hold in our agricultural sector. So forget about much of those, but if we can pick some aspects of our AI which we can immediately use, the rest I think is going to naturally follow.
Okay, the rest will just fall in place. I think because of time, we are now going to open the discussion so that we have questions and comments from the audience. Do we have a mic?
Yes, we do. You just need to raise your hands.
3 questions, please raise your hands. First 3 questions, there's a hand there. 2, in fact, this side.
Right, good. Thank you very much for the presentation. To what extent can agribusiness be inclusive, taking into consideration access to meaningful land in Zimbabwe? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have our second question.
Thank you very much. We have an AI discussion tomorrow, but I just want to say that we need to deploy what we call transformative technologies in agriculture if we're going to unlock that economic value we are speaking about. Transformative technologies such as blockchain, mobile telephony, renewable energy, big data, and in particular AI. AI alone will result in about $2 billion in terms of impact in Africa. The applications being precision farming, crop monitoring, yield prediction, livestock management, and achieving 4 major things: productivity enhancement, driving up efficiency, driving up cost savings, and also driving innovation. Number 2, we need to push value addition and beneficiation in Africa. But let's not just talk about it. Let's ask ourselves what finances are required to do beneficiation and value addition in agriculture. What human capital, what human skills are required to do value addition and beneficiation in agriculture? How do we get the markets to support that endeavor? But most significantly, Africans must be trading among themselves on value-added products. So in other words, this agricultural revolution must be driven by regional integration and continental integration, where the Africans are trading value-added agricultural products among themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third question.
Thank you, Professor and panelists. So mine is probably more a comment, and just looking at the recent prices from the mercantile exchange, we note that Zimbabwe's maize is quite expensive compared to what's happening in the region. And I think the question I would have is, why do we continue to prioritize it as a production crop when we can compete internationally, even with Ukraine, on things like white sorghum? Right, so as we think about our ability to produce, to sell, to be part of a global conversation, we also have to be careful where our strengths lie, and I think that's one big area. I think we talked about, and I'm concerned about the part that we have wheat that is now not being bought. We've also been aware that farmers are holding on to crops because they are waiting for the right price, and millers are struggling. So it's kind of creating a bit of, even internally, we need the market needs it, but we are not at that price. Yet that price isn't competitive in itself, and I think that's a question to have. But as I drive to my favorite Marange place, Macheka there's so many tomatoes that are just on the market there on the side of the road. And it just reflects, again, glut that is not being processed. And I would question why, as private sector and others, we haven't seen that as an opportunity, whether you're going to dry that and sell it to the Middle East and other places where it can actually be bought. Is it just because we don't have the system, we don't have the policy? What is missing? Because I work with the farmers that are producing these crops, and year on year, they do good production, but then they are unable to sell. And they like, okay, so why bother? All right, we've seen farmers uprooting chilies when we had a promise from a certain buyer, and that didn't happen. They just said, we are better off going back to our maize because we can eat it. So I think there are a few things there in terms of how we are enabling, especially smallholders that we work with mostly, but I assume this goes beyond smallholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Whilst our panelists are preparing their responses, I will have the second set of questions, and that will be our last set. 3 questions. There's one. Oh, okay, yes, please, Chairman.
Thank you, Prof. Mine is a question from, I think it's a general question. And the first one, I would like the panelists to advise. I've not heard the term GMO in all their presentations. Can you educate us on what that means? Because last week I was in America, go to Walmart, bananas are pegged, organic bananas and non-organic bananas. What does that mean? The second question is to Mr. Macheka, and I want an honest assessment. If I got you right, you said that Zimbabwe has got policy alignment in agriculture. And we have heard a decade or 2 of serious debate on Zimbabwe's agricultural policy discourse. And currently we are talking about title deeds and the complications thereof. We have a very complicated conversation in South Africa right now. and the geopolitics of land ownership versus productivity is again raising an ugly head. Do you think, one, there is necessity for land ownership to induce productivity? Number two, do you think the current Zimbabwean agricultural model is optimum for us to be able to produce competitively? We might not be good at everything, but in terms of our own distinctive competencies in Zimbabwe, does our current agricultural model support productivity? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Macheka. I hope you've taken note. Yes, our second question for this. Yes, ma'am, right in front.
Thank you. I'm Jasmine Chipika from Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. All our panelists are giving us the message that yes, we have great potential. All we need to do is to work on it. And my question is directed to Mr. Macheka of AFC. I want to hear a bit more, what is AFC doing in the space of working on it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have one question, I think from that end, the lady.
Thank you, Prof. So my question is on research and development. Mr. Macheka earlier alluded that the weather report says we're going to get rainfall in December. Traditionally, Zimbabwe would expect water to come through around October. By the time we get to December, tinenge takugocha chibage. So what are the universities or the innovation hubs doing to come up with solutions, yes, for Africa, but more for Zimbabwe, to say the crops that we've got and the climate that we have, how is it then working together? Speaking of AI as well, how then can we integrate it into our agriculture in Zimbabwe to come up with a solution that then works for us?
Thank you very much. We have our three questions, so we'll give our panelists an opportunity to respond and also to give their closing remarks. I'll start with you, Ms. Macheka. I think a number of questions were directed to you. So over to you, Francis.
Sorry, thank you. And thank you for those questions. They are very important but difficult questions. I'll try to do the best I can. I'll start with the one that talks about policy alignment. By saying that our government is trying the best they can to make sure that the land is productive, which actually is attributed to the issue of policy alignment, I'm looking at a historical perspective, where we started and where we're going. And it is very clear that government has put in place a few laws, some are still in SI form, to try and make sure that the person who is productive on the ground is enabled to do so. However, the success of that requires much more than just the SIs that have been put in place. The case in point that that has been raised, which I also raised earlier, was the issue of, if we are going to produce, we are going to encourage people to produce maize, for instance, and we end up not being able to sell it because we have shifted in the way we were doing things. That can become a detraction in terms of the overall objectivity of trying to go forward. However, I think at some point it was necessary for government to intervene, particularly in the marketing of commodities, to encourage people to go forward. Unfortunately, what it does is government will then give a price, and the price might not actually be in tandem with international prices, with cost structures. But if they continue to give that, people get used to it. And unfortunately, that's what has happened now. People can sell their commodities to private buyers, but because they are so used to getting an inflated price from government, which was originally used to support the farmer to be on the land and be productive for self-sufficiency. That has become a problem. But I don't think it takes away the fact that government is in trying the best it can to get you, the farmer, on the ground to produce and be self-sufficient. The issue of GMO that has been raised by my brother there, yeah, it's a big story. And it's a story that hinges on the fear of the unknown. We have people like Professor Mtambara here who might be able to tell us much more about this GMO story. But somehow, I know about 2-3 ministers that have actually been in the Ministry of Agriculture, for instance, during my time as an employee, who were completely adamantly opposed to the issue of the GMO, even to the extent of not getting cotton GMO. But I don't think people really understand.
You need to wind up before you run out of time.
The implications of that. So, yeah, that's a policy disalignment. And unfortunately, until we get to a point where people understand it, it might be difficult to actually change that mindset. Right. The one from my regulator, Dr. Chipika, on what AFC is doing at working on it. What we are doing as AFC is to try and make sure that everyone who wants to farm, small and large, is brought into the fold. We have programs that will be able to support women, that will be able to support youth, that will be able to support even large-scale production. And it is our deliberate effort to try and drive that, to make sure that all our population groupings are not marginalized when it comes to producing on the land. And that's what we are saying is working on it. And I think that, again, is in line with the government, particularly as they allocate the land. Prof, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Colette, closing remarks and maybe a few responses.
No, thank you, Prof. I was smiling because no question was aimed at me. And my colleague was given the toughest questions that he cannot answer now. But I think the truth is, if agribusiness is to occupy its rightful place, bring us the $1 trillion which we need, we have to, one, align our policies, legal and regulatory frameworks, so that we allow agribusiness operate as a private sector-driven business. We need governments, but they must be mindful not to babysit agriculture and agribusiness, but to enable it, create catalysts so that we thrive. The other thing which I want is that no matter how much we talk for agribusiness, it will be difficult for us to attract private sector investments if, for instance, we don't have policy predictability. We don't intervene to make sure that we don't restrict marketing and trade. So we must allow trade to happen. What we grow as a country, indeed, must be informed by many factors, but of course, we must color along the public interest. We must not necessarily stop growing maize, but there are commodities, for instance, Zimbabwe has got reviewed comparative advantage. Those should be the earners, while we also balance the social needs with maize and other crops. I think that's what I can say.
Thank you very much. I want to find out if Paulo is still online.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, yes, please, your closing remarks, please.
Please. Now, of course, I want to do a closing remarks and I want to add a proposal. We're talking about technology, we're talking about AI. I would like to ask with some partnership in Zimbabwe that we can develop a proof of concept looking for what is our best product in Zimbabwe and what is the best market to sell this product. And we can develop a small a proof of concept using AI that we can put in CapEx, because if you need to invest in AI, we're talking about increased production and reduced costs. And we're talking about the worldwide collaboration. I just leave my thank you and let me see how we can, the private market can start with Zimbabwe. I can invite some other partners for we start to see a proof of concept and how we can go for the next level for production to connect small farmers, young population at the same business.
Thank you very much. And with these remarks, this brings this session to an end. Please help me just give our panelists a big pam-pam, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you. And also to ourselves for being a good audience and participation. Thank you. Over to you.